What's up, everybody?
Hey, y'all.
How's it going? You supposed to tell me how it's going? Just play. Just play. Welcome back to OurLoveWontFail. We're here. We sit down with couples just to find out about their love, find out about how marriage goes, and to offer you some advice, some encouragement, anything to be able to help you move along in your own marriage or in your own relationship so that you know you can keep going.
So as always, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell over to the side so that you get notifications any and every time we post. So with us today, we would like to introduce you to Mr. and Mrs. Malcom Riley. Hey y'all! Really, the little.
Yeah, you know. So when we get started, we normally like to find out about your love story, like find out how this came about, how it came to be, what put y'all together, if something. So tell us about your love story.
I will let you take this one, honey.
Normally it'd be the woman that want to say.
No, she gave it up. She said,
Okay,
look,
we'll hear from
you
you.
got that.
So our initial meeting was at a party. We met at a party, and then I didn't get her number or anything like that. We met because she used me to like rescue her. We were sitting down. I don't know why I was sitting down at the time, but we were sitting down, and some dude was trying to talk to her, but she was like, "Oh my gosh, she really smells like weed." Like, she was like, "Can you just talk to me so that we can?" So he just would stop talking to me, and so I was like, "All right, cool." And so we actually had a legitimate conversation though while we were talking. She was telling me about where she was from, what school she went to, because we were in college at the time. She told me her high school, and then she told me what she did at the time, which she was substituting at that time. So I was like, all right, cool. And so that kind of moment passed, and I never really talked to her again. But I'm very investigative, so later on that night, I was able to find her on Facebook because she told me that
you was
you had
stalking.
Yeah,
That
But I was able to find her. That was probably in like a May, but I didn't really talk to her again until like August or so, maybe October.
No, we spoke before. After he had added me as a friend, some time went by, and June, July came around. We spoke briefly, and then August is when we actually had a real get-to-know-you conversation. And then it was also in August where we scheduled our first date. And when we had our first date was in August.
You sure?
He got all the way to October.
Yeah, I felt like it was
It
October.
might have been October.
I felt like October.
So okay, but I feel like something important happened in August, which is why that date.
I think that's when we like first started conversing.
Okay, so yes, maybe that's where the heavy talking started in August, and the
Okay.
first date occurred in October.
Yeah.
Okay,
You're right.
okay. You said the first date occurred in October.
Mhm.
So when did the love talk start? And who said I love you first?
Our timeline is actually very extensive.
I can tell. Maybe October we didn't even talk.
Right. First date was
No, they talked in
October.
August.
Oh,
Didn't
yeah.
speak again till January.
Jeez.
Oh my goodness.
After January, it became more consistent because February was, which is great, it's how cliche, Valentine's Day. That's when I
Okay.
officially became his boo. That's when he asked me to be his girlfriend.
Okay.
On
Valentine's.
Yes, February 14th, 2014.
Okay.
Look at that.
214.
That was done on
I'm
purpose.
kidding.
Right, 214. Okay.
Is when I became his girlfriend. But the I love you part, I really feel like it's hard to say who said it first, because if we're gonna get technical, he kind of said it, and it's actually funny because he said it, but he wanted me to understand that he wasn't saying it in such a way for me to believe that this is a forever thing just yet. Like that was kind of
He was like, I got love for you.
It was more like that. It was more like I got
Okay.
love for you in this moment. It was more like that.
Okay.
But actually, can't even really say who's truly said it first. Was it me?
I couldn't tell
I
you.
don't know actually.
Like-
So sorry to disappoint the people, but I think that we're kind of both drawing a blank there.
But we were thinking about the same moment though, because
Yeah.
where I actually just said it.
Yeah.
There was just a moment where she was just real understanding, which
Yeah.
was something newer for me. Dealing with some of the women that I had in the past, and for her to be so understanding about a certain incident, I was like, oh, cool. I was like, yo, yeah, I definitely love you right now.
Yeah.
But
Right now.
Just know.
I mean, right
this
now.
is not an extensive forever. I love
Understood
it.
that,
Just
and
know.
explain that.
Yeah.
This ain't for the week. It's just for right now.
I had been at a point in my life where I had dated people before, and things have gotten like misconstrued in some of those dating situations.
Mhm.
So at that point in time, I was real blunt and honest about everything. Okay, I just want to let you know like how things are going, like where I'm at, how I actually feel in this moment. Like I don't want you to take anything out of context or anything like that. So I just was real intentional about whatever words I used.
That's actually pretty good. That's actually
It
pretty
is.
good. You don't have people that want to say, hey, this is what it is, this is how it's going to be, take it or leave it. Most of the time, we prefer a drawn out, big fairy tale, kind of fluffy, type of love or type of being drawn into it. And really, don't really have to be all of that in order for it to be something special to whoever it is. And so, as we move into that, or as you guys get into that, when did we start talking about marriage, and how did that come about?
I kind of feel like, especially in most adult relationships, we were kind of relatively young at the time. But I think that him, being a part of the life that he was in, he's a pastor's son, he was heavily involved in the ministry, he had made it known that marriage was the goal. He wanted me to know that, I'm not just casually dating, whether it's going to be you and I or not. He kind of made it known that this is the goal. So I guess to answer your question, we spoke about marriage pretty early on, even before it was specific to us. Because again, he wanted me to know what the end goal was, and if you ain't with it, there's no future for us.
I got you. So when as you're getting into marriage, then how did you view marriage? I guess you can say. Did you think it was going to be harder than it really was, or
It's easier or harder than you thought?
easier? What exactly did you view about marriage?
You can do that first.
So I never saw marriage as something that was easy, because life, to me, there's just a lot of things in life that are hard, and concepts like love, like that's a really difficult concept. It seems kind of easy because of how common it is, and you see a lot of couples that are doing it, and they're doing it well. But marriage to me never was something that I thought was going to be easy. So I don't think it's more difficult than I thought it was. But I do think that I ran into some challenges that I didn't expect. So for me, it's not more difficult, but there are some things that were just unexpected that I could never have planned for.
Sure.
And so the challenges that you ran into that you didn't expect, how did the two of you overcome those challenges and those bumps in the road that weren't expected?
I mean, we can't even, there's no overcome, there's still overcoming.
Okay.
It's still a present thing, very present thing for us.
Okay.
Even in 5+ years, we are still learning. And it's like he said about expectations, that was the difficult part, is that it was different. When you talk about different upbringing and different environments that you come from, that was where the different views of marriage came. Malcom does come from a more nuclear family than myself. He is part of a blended family, but he's had the luxury of being part of a 2-parent household, as I did not. I didn't even see my parents married together. They divorced when I was like 3 years old, so I don't even know what that looked like. All I can remember is having not a single mom, because she was married, but she was also 120% mom. So, and rest her soul, I can definitely say this was not intentional, but I didn't grow up with the best example of what even being a wife looked like.
Sure.
And
I could be a great mom.
Right.
As far as being a wife, I didn't really know what that looked like, because my mom was so about her children. It was just she didn't neglect her husband, but it was just hard to really differentiate between the two for her. The lines weren't blurred, and I think that it's important, they were blurred, and I think that it's important that a difference be made. So yeah, though I think that the major differences that occurred between us was because of the different views of what family and marriage look like.
Okay, and you said something about expectations. So did you go in with certain expectations that weren't met, or did you go in with no expectation, and as time went, on, you started to, think of or build these expectations for each other?
No, I for sure went in with expectations. Like
Cook? clean
Nah.
socks, coffee.
Socks.
It's crazy because I probably cook more than she does, I think.
Mhm.
And I don't mind it because, it's just, it's just how it is. I'm closer to home at the moment. So that's one reason why. So I think that it's probably circumstantial based on how things have been for us, or with our various working situations. But now those type of expectations, I didn't even think about like the gender roles in that way. To me, I feel like my personality and my presence pushes me into certain gender roles no matter what. Like, there's just certain things that just happen because of my demeanor, my personality, and things like that. So that happens. But I had certain expectations because of the fact that I do ministry so often, and I'm part of the church, things like that. So I had certain expectations in that regard. I think earlier on, even when we were dating, because I was so involved in ministry, I don't think she fully, understood that, because that's not a background that she came from. She goes to church, but it's different between being a casual church member at a bigger church that holds 5,000 people than being a small church where you're the pastor's family and you're at every event, and not only are you at every event, you're leading this ministry, but also sub-leading this ministry, but then you have to be a part of this ministry. So I think that was a challenge that had to be overcome, where I'm one of those people like, oh, this is an easy transition, boom. But for her, it was a little bit different. She's like, whoa, I want to be able to do some stuff on weekends, and I want to be able to do some stuff here, there, and why is your focus always on ministry? And that was something that I had to learn how to balance too. The Bible talks about this, about your family being part of your ministry, and as being, your first ministry. You need to be able to operate at home well, then you can come and operate at the church well. Sure. So that was one thing I had to kind of overcome, because I had to operate at the church well, but it's the operating at home and now being able to blend the two. So that was probably like my biggest expectation that I felt like didn't get met. Because I always think about, being equally yoked, and that means to me working together. When I hear equally yoked, they're talking about ox. They're both on a yoke, and so they're both being able to pull that same amount of weight. And so I had this expectation that we're going to be able to work together in ministry, but our passions are different. You know her passion in ministry is actually in a different place than like mine. I do music. I have some other passions here and there. Her passion in ministry is mentoring. She wants to be able to mentor like young girls and being able to do that. So that's a different side than what I'm doing. So I can't expect her to be in the same place in ministry that I am. But she still has, her passion for what she wants to do. But it's just not in the same place where I was probably thinking like, okay, we can be able to sing together because she sings. We're gonna be able to do all this together, and it just didn't work out exactly how I thought.
So is that something that you guys talked about beforehand? Like, when you went into marriage, did she understand your expectations as far as ministry went before you guys got married, or is that something that kind of like surprise?
It wasn't a surprise, but I also don't think that the expectations were fully understood.
Okay.
And it's crazy because I was recently in conversation with a friend of mine about this, because I was under the impression that, like he said, if we're serving God at the same capacity, but it looks different, I thought that was good enough.
Okay.
But for him, his vision was we would do it together, side by side, all the time.
Okay.
And I still doing it, still wrapping my head around that concept, because again, I thought that as long as I had a heart of servitude, that would make him happy. And so yes, to answer your question, the understanding wasn't there because I wasn't aware that he was actually disappointed that we didn't share the same exact vision and that we didn't want to serve in the same way. I was not aware of that.
Now looking at it in a broader scope, is this something that you look at and say, with what you're passionate about and with what she's passionate about, you guys can be those two oxen that are pulling that same thing? You're pulling that same weight or load. It's just hers is in this portion and yours is in this portion. But is that something now that when you look at it, you say, we can both do this. You can pull your part, I pull my part, but yet we're still going the same way.
I really thank God because when God kind of like makes plans for you, you're able to kind of move forward. And so my initial plan, I went to school for public relations initially, so I wanted to do like marketing and all this other stuff. But then I ended up working at Child Health, which many of us have worked at, and I stayed there for like 6 years. So now I'm like, man, I got all this work experience in this therapeutic place, this human services background. So now I was like, all right, cool, boom, let's move. So I changed my major around to where now I can fit into that, where all my work experience is. Because I'm not about to go and build up a whole new work experience to get jobs when I'm qualified for jobs in this field. Right? I'm qualified, and I don't hate it at all. Like I love working with kids and mentoring people and things like that. So I think that with that, now we've been able to align some of our goals. She has her degree in human services, and some of the plans that I have in terms of ministry, I need her in that aspect now. At this point, for the things that I really want to do, for the biggest pushes that I want to make, I need her. And so I think that's a great thing. And I definitely thank God for that, because to me, like I said, that's not something that I initially pictured at all whatsoever, but that's the eventual outcome.
So that's something to look at. And I always say God does things on purpose, for a purpose. And so initially, when we look at how we are moving through life, and sometimes we might not even understand. I'm working at Child Health. This is just a passing through per se, but really that was being molded so that when I got to this point where God wanted me to be, this is something that obviously I'm gonna be moving forward in. And so I always say God does things on purpose, for a purpose. Now, on the flip side of that, were there any fears about marriage?
We all value companionship. I can speak for everybody. Companionship is something that I value. But on the other end of it, I felt like in marriage, I was afraid to lose my individuality. I was afraid to come into marriage, and instead of having a healthy, interdependent relationship where we're two whole people that just come together and be one, I was afraid that I would forget who Kaila was, disregard who Kaila was, be all about my new husband, and be unhappy. Those were my fears. I feel like somebody I used to work with actually at Child Health, who I still consider to be a mentor, I will never forget that he said this to me. He said relationships are for two whole people. They're not for people looking to complete each other. And crazy that he would say this so many times, I went into the relationship with him with the opposite mindset. I was looking for somebody to complete me. And it resulted in some unfair behavior, some unfair treatment toward him, me having unrealistic expectations of him. And it wasn't until I fully understood that concept, like it's okay for you to be you. You add to the relationship. You're not looking for somebody to complete you. You're a whole individual. God has made you whole. There is nothing that he can give you that God hasn't already given you. And I definitely had to tell myself that over and over again. So to answer your question, yeah, my fear was losing myself. Because it's hard to mold two different people, and we are so different, and we're learning that more and more as we go. And while we're learning it, we're starting to see the positives, but we are very different. And it can get very difficult in that aspect when you're so different, trying to find ways to relate that are positive and not constantly being at each other's throat.
And so how do you communicate through those differences? Has the communication grown and become better, throughout the relationship and throughout your marriage? Have you guys learned how to, instead of like at each other's throat, have you learned to, communicate those things and work through them?
So one of the biggest things about me is that I suffer from arrogance. Like I'm an arrogant person. It's crazy. I remember Deacon Robinson told me this probably when I was like 6th grade. He was like, "You're arrogant." I was like, and it's true. Like
wait. I'm so mad that you were so nonchalant. Like,
right.
That's who I am. Like,
I suffer from arrogance.
I just want you to know, I'm arrogant.
It's right.
Continue with your life.
For me, I'm pretty sure that it was just like a defensive mechanism for me. Like, because if you think of yourself in a certain way, like nobody else can tell you anything. You know what I'm saying? So I just got to the point to where, and then I don't just think about myself in that way. I try to make it true. Like, if I'm not good at something, I'm gonna become good. If I don't know something, I'm gonna find out. Like,
Played into the arrogance.
Yeah, I think you got to be able to back it
It's
up.
gonna
You know what
be
I'm saying? You gotta be able to back it up. So I think because of that, it messed up a lot of the communication in terms of the differences, particularly. Because when you think like that, you think that your way is like the only way. And not only that, so like we would have differences, she would say her things, and this is what I meant when I said earlier that my personality pushes us into certain gender roles. So she would say certain things, but she's not as loud, she's not as passionate as I am when I speak. And so a lot of her ideas and views would get pushed down because I just either overtalked her or I made it seem like I was just super right, and then she would come back and be like, you know what? I thought about it more, you were wrong.
I thought about it more.
But you can say stuff in a certain way, and it's like, dang, he must be right, because like the way he's saying it, the facts that, because like if I, for one, like I play out everything in my head before it happens, right? So if I know that we're gonna have a conversation, I'm about to play out the whole scenario. I know what I'm gonna say, and then I'm gonna play out 5 different scenarios for what she might say. And then I'm gonna have answers for everything that I think that she might say. And for the most part, I can accurately guess what she's gonna say. So I'm always gonna have something quickly ready to respond to her and say.
So in other words, it's not a very active listener.
I was about to say that.
I mean, but that's something that
the conversation prepared
A
already
reflective
with your responses.
to me, because I don't like surprises. Surprises is not something that I like. I like to be always ready and equipped. I'm a big Batman fan, and one of the things about Batman is like he thinks about contingency plans. It's like for every person on Justice League, he has a way to defeat them right now.
Yes.
Anybody, like if Superman decided he wanted to pop
No,
up,
I don't care about his kryptonite belt.
Yeah, he
No,
gonna have
Superman will still overcome.
Okay, we not.
I mean, we're not.
How did we get on superheroes? Like, we focused.
But so that's kind of how I walk through life. Like I have these contingencies plans, and it makes it harder for me to build relationships because when you're always being defensive, you're never really open. It's what she said about me just recently. Actually, we were talking about it. She was like, you know what? It always seems like you have your walls up. And I thought about it. I'm like, oh, you're kind of right. And it's because you're always trying to be defensive. You never want to look bad. You never want to, let things go in the wrong direction. And when you're always pre-planning, you always have this plan B, plan C. It makes it harder to build relationships. It makes it harder to be genuine with people, things like that.
That's true.
So, like I said, I think I overpowered her a lot in the beginning. Now, I read the 5 Love Languages. That was one book that really helped. So that helped me to understand, like, all right, you got to stop thinking about you. What is the way to, hear her out, to find out her love language? So I think with that, our communication has grown. So now I'm not trying to just push her to the side all the time. I'm not always trying to just like push her views down. I'm like, okay, let me hear you out. Let me listen to you. Let me even take some advice, because that's one thing I did do. Let me take some advice from you. So I think our communication has grown a lot.
That's a good thing.
I like that you brought up the 5 love languages. In reading that, did you figure out what your love language was? And did the two of you communicate those love languages?
Yes, we did. It was actually a really helpful time in our lives when we decided to do that. And it was actually a very helpful thing in our relationship because it did give him perspective. And to kind of just add to his comments about communication, we are currently and actively working on our communication. And something that I've realized and shared with him is that one of the most important communication skills you can have in a marriage is to be able to create a safe place for the two of you to come and express your concerns and your perspectives and your thoughts without feeling attacked. And
Absolutely.
the reason I'm bringing that up is because I can acknowledge all the work that he put in for me as far as working on his tactfulness and things like that. But then I had to check myself and ask myself, am I creating a safe place for him to come and communicate with me? Or am I always having him on the defense because he feels like anything he says is going to offend me or anything he says is going to hurt me? So I had to think about that. I was like, safe doesn't always mean, lighthearted. It doesn't always mean like, something is dangerous. It just means if my husband also doesn't feel comfortable coming to me with his concerns, and there's something I'm not doing correctly.
Absolutely.
So I'm looking on the inside and I'm trying to come up with different ways to kind of emotionally regulate better so that he doesn't feel like, dang, I can tell her nothing. Because I guarantee he feels that way. And he does. And I'm trying to do better so that, again, so I don't feel attacked and that he doesn't feel like, man, I can tell her nothing without her just boo-hoo crying,
And I think part of that lends to you kind of taking everything he says personal.
Yeah.
And sometimes you gotta, take the personal out of it. That's just how he feels at that time.
Yes.
And so, you just kind of gotta roll with what he feels and then, talk about it. And I like how you said creating that safe space for communication, because not everything has to be an argument.
Right.
There are plenty of things that married couples can talk about and just communicate about, and call it that. It doesn't have to be a full-on argument. It doesn't have to be, you coming in with your prepared statements already. Like, it can literally just be a conversation. Look, this makes me uncomfortable, this, and this. So what can we do, to kind of, take my feelings into account, but not neglect yours. You know what I'm saying? And so I like that. Do you guys do like, since you guys figured out your love languages, do you, kind of play to his love language and vice versa? Do you play to her love language? Because I know in knowing each other's love languages, there's certain things that will grab her that won't grab you.
Yeah.
But there's things that'll grab you that won't grab you. So have you kind of like, dived into his love language and basically began to learn to communicate with him in that area?
We've started.
Okay.
I can definitely admit that it hasn't had the greatest progress so far because, again, it's like you said, being mindful and remembering that you have to speak their love language.
Yes.
And a lot of the time, I'm looking for, or I'm showing love in the way that I receive it, in the way that I know it, and it could mean scrap diddly to him. Not that it doesn't mean anything to him, but it's not. He'll be appreciative,
Right.
but it won't grab him,
Right.
like you said. So
Right.
I am still learning the things that will grab him.
Mhm.
Like, we've learned that. Can I share what your love language is? His is acts of service.
Okay.
That was number one for him.
Okay.
Mine's are words of affirmation.
Absolutely.
So my husband like when I give him scalp massages.
Okay.
He like when I rub his feet,
I
grooming
understand.
and different self-care things. He likes when I do those things for him, and I sometimes forget. And right now, that's the only one that I'm currently aware of, but it's a big one. It's one that he thoroughly enjoys, and I think that I've kind of slacked off a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm learning that, Kayla, you just need to do better. Instead of having so many expectations and wanting him to cater to you. Remember, girlfriend, you ain't been on your stuff either. So I'm
Right.
gonna have to check that.
But nowadays, because you have so many people that they'll get into the marriage year one or 6 months in, yeah, okay, I'm done.
Done.
And so easily move on to the next. So let me ask you, what it is that allows you to say, you know what, this didn't work, we're gonna try again the next day.
Mm.
You know what, this didn't work,
Spirit.
let me try again this next week or the next month.
I can't speak for all couples, but for me in particular, this Christian walk is something that I really want to live out fully. I don't see it as my religion. I see this as my actual, this is a necessary part of the culture and what makes me who I am. And that is the biggest thing that holds me in the marriage. So even when my love for her might wane or get weaker, my love for God has to continue to be pushed and pushed. And if I say to myself, I've made this promise before God and man that I'm going to take care of you in sickness and in health, rich or poor, then that's something that I have to take seriously. I have to see that as a legitimate, serious decision, and I can't just let anything push me off of it. And there's, I think about a lot of times, when I'm mad, the biggest thing I think about, and I could be mad and want to storm out the door, and I can get 3 feet away. And this happened before, where I had to come back. I was like, dang, now I got to come back, because as I was driving off, I was thinking about some of the things that I do in a simple way, and I'm like, dang God, as soon as I do it, I ask for grace like right away, like I ask for mercy right away. But yet I'm not able to give that same grace. I'm not able to give that same mercy. So if she makes a mistake, I go to God. I'm like, God, help me to be gracious, help me be merciful. Let me have your spirit so I can move. The only way we really can perfect and show love is through God. I see God as love. I see God as the only real love, the only standard for love. And so that's the only way that we're able to make it work. Because if I was to just think in a secular, self-centered, manly, fleshly way, I'll be like, all right, yeah, calling it quits. You made me mad enough, especially because when I was dating, I conditioned myself for that. When I was dating, it's easy. Oh, boom.
Right.
Yeah, so, you know, so marriage is a totally different ballgame, a totally different commitment. So
I agree, because that's the same thing I tell her and I tell everybody else, that my objective has always been to please God. And my love for her is a reciprocation of me trying to please God. Because we, like you said, we made those vows, we've said these things before God and men of what we're going to do. And I want God to be pleased with every aspect of my life, and that includes this. And so me loving her is my objective of trying to please God. And so she gets that love specifically because of my wanting to please God. It's almost like the cherry on top, in the sense that I have her look at it as. Because if I didn't want to please God, like you said, this is okay.
and you can easily just be like, you know, forget it. I don't want to forgive you, you know. When you look at, you know, and a lot of the things I said before that I wanted to post, you know, love is patient, love is kind in our house, because I wanted those things to be a reminder for us. Like, hey, we're working towards love. If we're trying to be loving, hey, are you being patient? Maybe we need to walk by this every day and look at it and just say, hey, was I patient with him? Was I kind? Was I proud? Was I rude? Was I self-seeking? You know, and we can go through that checklist and just look. And there's just so many different scriptures that really help you. Don't go to bed while you're angry. And I think she's way better at that than me, because I'm the type of person. If we're mad, this is our bed. I'm right here. I'm actual bed, and she will, no matter what, she will come up behind me, try to grab me, you know, try to lay her head. And you know how weird you look when you try to be mean to somebody, just like, oh. Like it's a weird look. It's a weird look. Like you are angry, you like all hawkish, and she just like it's hard, you know. And so when we do have like conflict resolution, she's normally the person who is bringing that conflict resolution, because of her softness and her caring and her ability to forgive is one of the greatest qualities that I believe she has. She has a great quality with that. Like her ability to forgive is great. Her ability to give grace is great. And so that's one thing that I learned from her as well.
That's good. We were asked, that's actually where we get the Our Love Won't Fail, where it comes from. When the pastor asked us to have a motto or credo for our marriage, that's what we looked at as the Bible, 1 Corinthians lists, this is how love should be. And if you do these things, love never fails. And so we have conditioned ourselves in our marriage to be able to say, we're going to strive to do all of these things as much as possible so that our love won't fail. And as long as, for us, we keep that banner over us, our love won't fail, I think that's the reason that we kind of continue to push through to the next day. Because sometimes it can be day by day.
But I like your idea of posting it in your house. Absolutely, post it. And as you walk by, was I patient? Was I kind? You know, was I gentle with him today? Oh, I wasn't. So let me go and rectify that. Let me go and.
The Bible says to, you know, write it as a sign on the door. Write it as a sign. Put it on your hand. Put it on, you know, I think they was talking about put it on your forehead. Attach it. You know, you want to have it everywhere, because the word is what you live by, and you need to be reminded, because point blank, our flesh is like a very weak thing, and we can lean to that. That's like our first initial reaction, like, boom, I can get back at it right now. I like, especially when you know, we've been around each other for 5 years. Our communication has been slacking, but point blank, we've learned some things about each other. We definitely know how to push each other's buttons.
Absolutely. That's one of the first things you learn.
We know how to push each other's buttons, so I know how I can say something and it's going to cut it. So do I choose to say something and let it cut, or do I say, no, you know what? How, like, that's for day dedication, that's one of the things that I've been trying to work on is saying, how can I be more and more disciplined? Like, how do I deny myself more and just discipline. So,
Absolutely, I like that. So, in the spirit of love and the spirit of marriage, do you guys have any advice or any, precursors for like
Encouragement.
right? Any encouragement for those that are either looking to get married or are married? Because I know
Okay, well, for the first part, for those that are looking to get married, my first piece of advice would be in the dating stage, in the courting stage, don't neglect any of the small things. I think where him and I kind of struggled a little bit in the beginning is because he was so focused on knowing all the monumental things in my life, past traumas or family drama or the big things. But then birthdays and anniversaries came around and my husband was like, I don't know what to get you. Little things like my interests and my favorite color and things like that. So I really think that in that dating stage, that courting stage, it's important to consider all of those things as important facts about your significant other. For those that are already married, a big word of advice I want to give is something we kind of touched base a little bit on is it's okay, and it sounds silly, but it's not silly to have a plan, a blueprint that's specific to your marriage. Whether it's posting things in your home, whether it's designating this part of the house for conflict resolution. For instance, we just bought Janae, our daughter, a timeout chair, an inflatable timeout chair. And we plan to be very enforcing about that timeout chair in this specific area for you to regulate yourself, baby girl, and then come back. So doing things like that in your home. I had spoken with a couple of years ago about having like a honesty table. And that's something that they can call at any time during the day, at any point, honesty table. Stop all other conversations, stop all other distractions. Let's sit face to face, hold a pillow so nobody's talking with their hands and being extra aggressive. And now let's talk about the issue.
let's be honest.
So I know it sounds silly and it may even sound to some like extra work that they don't want to do, but I think that it is very important in your marriage to put that work in.
I like that.
So for me, the biggest advice I would give to both people who are trying to get married, people who are married, is what do you do after the fairy tale ending, happily ever after, you got married, the love is there, but now all the butterflies may not be as there anymore. It's not that you're not looking at her and she's just the most beautiful thing in the world, but you start to realize, dang, she snores, and she does this, and this really is starting to irritate me, and who puts the ketchup in the refrigerator, who does that? Like, so you learn these different nuances that are different for you guys because, you grew up in different environments, different households, your family culture is this way, his family culture is this way. So you grow up in what's next, and I mentioned this earlier, the vow is extremely important. One thing that I would have to say is that make sure that when you say your vows, you're not just taking it word for the generic thing. You know what the vows are saying, and that this is a legitimate promise between you, God, and you guys as a couple. Because the vow is important. When you feel like, dang, I'm not really loving, still remember that you made a promise. Still remember that that's there. I heard somebody talk about this one time because somebody was talking about, they want a divorce and it's because they just weren't happy anymore. And he was just like, you didn't get married just to be happy. You got married because you made a promise and this is love. Marriage is an adult decision. And you can't just say, okay, I'm done with this adult decision because I'm no longer happy. That's a childlike mentality. Oh, I'm not happy anymore. So, like, my daughter says this before. She was just like, I'm not happy anymore. And she was crying because we took something away from her. And so now because we took something away from her and she's not happy anymore, now she's like, her demeanor has changed. She doesn't want to be around. She runs to her room or whatever. We can't do that in marriage. Marriage is not just about being happy. It's about that promise that you made and making sure that you are showing love to each other.
Absolutely wonderful. So we want to say thank you to our couple here, Malcom and Kaila Riley, for joining us on Our Love Won't Fail. And I think it's very important for us to understand there's no real blueprint, there's no real book that you can know about love. No marriage is going to be the exact same.
Absolutely.
But what you can do is you can find others who have been through, who have gone through. You can talk to them, you can get advice, and they can encourage you to keep moving on to the next day.
Absolutely.
So, as always, we want to thank you for joining us. We want to thank this lovely couple for sitting with us and talking with us, and we want to thank you guys for watching. And as always, do us that favor and hit that subscribe button and the bell over to the side so that you get all of our notifications.
Peace.